Hi, it's Summer, and today I'm going to be doing the mid-year book freakout tag. This is a tag that I've been doing, I think, since the start of my channel, so I have several other versions of this video from years in the past, so I'll try to link all of them that are still public in the description so you can go watch those ones if you want to. I think that this is such a fun, like, halfway evaluation of your reading for the year, and I'm so excited to talk to you about all of these books. Number one is, what is the best book that you've read so far this year? My favorite book so far this year is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, and I honestly don't really see anything beating this. It's a new all-time favorite book. It was so good. And it's kind of crazy because I read this in January. It was one of the first books that I read this year, and immediately when I read it I was like, this is probably going to be my favorite book of the year. This one follows two childhood best friends as they're in college and they start developing games together. It's about so much more than that though. It follows a big span of time. It follows a lot of different characters and their backstories. It follows trauma and chronic pain. It is just so good, and you're definitely going to see this one pop back up in later questions. Number two is the best sequel that you've read so far this year. This one was a no-brainer for me. It's Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett. This is the sequel to Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which was my favorite book last year. This just had all of the same vibes as the first book. It was everything that I wanted it to be. It was different enough that it didn't feel like an exact copy of the first book, but it had everything about the first book that I loved in it. There's a different, really small mountain town that we're staying in this one. There's lots of new different characters, there's new fairies, curses, and cozy vibes. It was just everything that I wanted, and I loved it. Number three is a new release that you haven't read yet but want to, and that is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I think this is just a beautiful book. I mean, honestly, all of these books that I've talked about so far have been so pretty, but I love the vibe of this cover and the sprayed edges and the end pages. They're so pretty. I think this is fantasy and it takes place in the Spanish Golden Age in Madrid. I don't really know anything else about it though, and I think that I'm gonna keep it that way. I definitely want to read this one this year, but I think I'm gonna wait until like the cooler months. I feel like this would be like the perfect like October book. Anyone who's read this, you'll have to let me know what you think the best time of year to read this is in. I'm a very seasonal reader. Number four is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I'm obviously so excited for Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. I've read all of his books. He's one of my favorite authors, and he's an auto-buy author, so I automatically am going to have to read this book. I'm actually also going to be a co-host for this book for my friend Jessie's book club, Sleep When I'm Dead. So me, her, Jordan, Lena, and Gwen are all going to be discussing this book in the month of July. So you should come and read it with us because you're probably going to be reading it anyway, so you might as well come and like discuss it with us. It'll be such a fun time. I'm really looking forward to it. I love with his books that like you just never know if it's going to be like an actual just like regular thriller or if it's going to be like a paranormal one. And I love going into his books like not knowing what it's going to be. Another one that I'm so excited about, I think it comes out in September, is A Dark and Drowning Tide by Allison Saft. I actually have an arc for this one. I've kind of forgotten what this one is about, but I'm obsessed with the cover and I already know that I love Allison Saft's writing style. It's going to be dark and gothic and queer, which are some of my favorite buzzwords. Number five is your biggest disappointment. I have a few for this one. First is kind of a controversial one. It's The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I thought this was going to be 5 stars going into it because I've heard that it's just so cozy and heartwarming, has lots of found family. It did have those aspects to it, but there were just a lot of things in that book that I just did not enjoy, and I found the fat phobia to be kind of triggering to me. This one follows a government worker that's sent to go and check in on this care home for children. They're magical children though. He's a plus-size character and everyone is so fat phobic to him. There's just constant talk about his diet. There's a constant like internal monologue, which I can understand and relate to. But it was just a lot to like have other people like talking about him and his body so much. And I understand that it was part of his character development to go from having those thoughts to not caring what other people think and just loving himself, but I think it could have been done in a different way. It was just a lot, and it just kept repeatedly being brought up. If it was only like a couple times throughout the book I could have handled it, but it was just like relentless. Another book was Divine Rivals. I didn't hate it by any means. It just felt very YA. I didn't really understand like the mythology and stuff that was happening. It didn't really make sense to me. I don't know, I think I gave it like 3 stars or something. So I liked it just fine. It's just kind of like a middle of the road book. Just kind of meh. I know that's a very controversial opinion because everyone loves this book so much. I think I just had really high expectations for it because of that, and it just didn't meet those expectations. My most disappointing book though was The Poisoner. This is a book from an indie author. I think it's their first published book. The Instagram marketing for this really got me. It was so perfect. All of the reels and things that were happening around this book were so good and so intriguing. It's advertised as a woman who's a poisoner and she kills bad men, and she gains the attention of a vampire and he becomes like obsessed with her. The whole aesthetic of this book on the author's page was just like everything to me. I was so excited to read this book. They had also commissioned a lot of like character art for this book that also just like added to the imagery. I was so convinced this was going to be like a 5-star book, but it was 2 stars. I borderline hated it. It was not good. The writing wasn't good. The pacing was awful. It was so repetitive, like literally the same events just like kept happening over and over again. Literally nothing in this book made sense. Like nothing was logical. Anything that the characters were doing and saying, like these felt like such caricature fake characters. And I mean they're fake characters because they're book characters. You want your characters to feel real though. And these characters were not making like real people decisions. Also, I knew this was going to be a dark romance. There are trigger warnings in the front of the book, but SA like wasn't one of those things. I mean, there's lots of things that were like kind of adjacent to that were mentioned, but there was like a straight up like SA scene towards the end of this book, and it just like wasn't even mentioned in the trigger warning, and it was not good. It was not a good time. I've never wanted to write fan fiction. I've never had the urge to, but I so badly want to write my version of this book so that I can have some closure and have the book that I wanted. I might be making an AO3 account after this. We'll see. I just would highly recommend to not pick this book up. It was not good. Number 6 is Your Biggest Surprise. For me, that was Beautiful Darkness. This is a graphic novel and I didn't know anything about it before going in. I just thought that it looked like such a pretty cover. It looked kind of like cottagecore. I somehow missed the hand that's on here. That probably would have clued me into what this book actually is. This is a horror graphic novel, and that was such a shock to me. It starts out like pretty cute and normal, and then all of a sudden it's not. The imagery in this one is like a lot. Also though, I loved this. I think I gave this 4 stars. It was like all over the place, but like in the best way. I love that someone made this, and I love my reading experience that I had around it. So I was very surprised by this book, but in a great way. Little traumatized, but also I loved it. It was great. Number 7 is a new favorite author. Sydney Shields is definitely a new all-time favorite author of mine. She's going to be an auto-buy author. I will read anything that she writes. I read The Honey Witch a few weeks ago. I have a reading vlog if you want to go watch it. Spoiler, I loved it. I'm obsessed with this book. It's a new all-time favorite book. Her writing style is just so good. The queer rep was amazing. Just the vibes, just everything about this book. It was a perfect book. I'm obsessed with it. It's about a woman who finds out that she comes from a line of witches, and she gets invited by her grandmother to go and live on an island with her and learn to become the new Honey Witch. The magic system in this book revolves around honey and bees. There's lots of nature, but there's also a curse that comes with being the Honey Witch, and it's that no one will ever fall in love with you. And it's so good. This one is kind of right up there with Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I think this one is just like slightly more of a favorite, but like barely. This book is so good. Number 8 is Your Newest Fictional Crush. I definitely have a crush on Mary from Hail Mary by Candy Steiner. She's a curvy tattoo artist. She's just like so cool because she's like a tattoo artist and is just like covered in tattoos, and also like her sense of style sounds really cool. Definitely have a crush on her. And then I also really liked Ewan from The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston and Miles from Funny Story. I just really liked how real Miles felt. And Ewan was just so dreamy, and he's a chef. Like, he could cook me food. Definitely have crushes on those two. Number 9 is new favorite characters. Definitely Sam, Sadie, and Marks from Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. They're such complex and faceted characters. They just felt like real people to me. Like, I wanted to Google them afterwards, and I just love all of them. Honorable mentions though are definitely the characters from The Honey Witch. I related so much to Marigold, and I really loved her character. And then I also just barely finished my reread of Throne of Glass. I started my reread last year and finally just now caught up. All of the characters from Throne of Glass though are all favorites. I love this series so much. I'm so glad that I have a tattoo for this series. It's just like such a soul series at this point. These characters are everything to me. Number 10 is a book that made you cry. This book for sure. I think this is the hardest I've cried because of a book. If you know, you know. I was ruined, just ripped apart by this book. I feel like I'm still not recovered and I read this in January. I was just literally a sobbing mess. I'm pretty sure I have a picture. I will put it on the screen for you. Also though, the 7-Year Slip also made me sob. Not in the same way as Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, but still I was sobbing. I might also have a picture of myself for this one too. This one was one of Jesse's favorite books of last year, and this one was Gwen's favorite book of last year. So I read these as part of like a video of reading my friend's favorite books of 2023. So I took pictures of me crying so that I could send them to Jesse and Gwen and be like, this is what your favorite book did to me. Also though, Kingdom of Ash, sobbed my eyes out. And I knew I was going to because I also cried my eyes out the first time I read it. So I knew it was coming, but I still just like couldn't stop it, you know? So good, but also so sad. Next is a book that made you happy. These made me cry, but they also made me very happy, which is why they're favorite books of mine. This one also made me so happy. Funny Story also made me super happy. I remember laughing out loud multiple times while reading this. Don't Want You Like a Best Friend by Emma Albin also made me really happy. It was just a really sweet, cute female romance set in the Victorian era. It was just like exactly what I wanted to read right then, and it just like definitely made me happy. Next is your most beautiful book that you've purchased this year. This one was a no-brainer for me. Usually I have like a million answers for this question because I love beautiful covers, but this book is like my favorite book cover of all time, so I automatically knew it was going to be this one. This edition of Emma is so stunning. I cannot get over it. The end pages are really pretty. All right, and the last question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? At the very beginning of this year, I picked out 4 books that I wanted to read by the end of the year. I feel like I always set myself up for failure and pick too many books that I need to read, so this time I just decided to keep it like really simple. One of the ones on that list was The 7-Year Slip, so I already read this one and loved it. Another one is Mixed Signals by B.K. Borison, and as you can tell, I am currently reading it. I'm more than halfway, so I'm going to be finishing this one in the next couple of days. So that one will be marked off my list. So the only 2 that are left are The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern and A Far Wilder Magic by Alison Saft. I've had this one for a few years and I keep putting it on my list of like, I need to read this year, and then I never get to it, so this is the year that I'm absolutely getting to it. I think I'm gonna save it for the fall though. I think this one is historical fiction fantasy. I've heard really good things about it. And then The Night Circus has been on my TBR probably since like 2015. The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern is my favorite book of all time. So I feel like there's a lot of pressure on this book for me, but I also feel like I'm gonna love it because Erin Morgenstern's writing is my all-time favorite writing style. It's just so beautiful. It's very poetic and flowery. And this is about a magic circus. Like, I just feel like I'm gonna love it, but that's also making me put it off. Because of the expectation. So there's my little halfway check-in. I feel like it's been a really good reading year for me so far. I've read some new all-time favorites. I've also been a lot pickier with my star ratings this year, and I just feel like that's been really good for me. I can't wait to see everybody else's videos doing this. They're some of my favorites to watch every year. In the comments though, you should let me know what your favorite book of the year has been so far, and also your most disappointing book. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.
Appalachian sunrise.